here we go, game week 302, and we're back with another specialist preview. The really exciting thing about this week, no, not the bump in prizes for Specialist Limited, it's the fact that we also have Specialist Challenger Europe this week. I think it's a really, really good step to add this in the regions, because it gives ultimately more utility to lower tier cards and gives a real opportunity for you to step up into the divisions, which can be pretty competitive. So I know we've got Challenger this week, we've got Champion coming in the future weeks. All in all, I think it's a really exciting step and gives more managers that are focused on skill and scouting the opportunity to be competitive. The main difference we've got is that the Specialist Limited continues to pay out a mix of limited cards and rare cards, whereas the Specialist Challenger, although it is also a limited tournament, it only pays out limited cards. So there's little subtle nuances between the two, but you can still win some really, really top limited cards in that Specialist Challenger Europe. So I will be personally looking to go for both this week. What I have done as a result is tried to pick a good selection of players this week, but mixing in some that are challenger focused as well. So although this is a generalized preview, hopefully it gives you opportunities and thoughts around players that could enter one tournament or the other. So without further ado, let's get started. We're going to start with the goalkeeper. Besiktas is young goalkeeper Ersin Destanoğlu, only just been minted on the platform, and he qualifies. And I think what's really, really interesting to me is that they've got a really good fixture this weekend against a newly promoted side in the Super League. And he's been very, very hit and miss. There's been a couple of poor performances, but the last couple of games since they've made a few signings over the summer have definitely improved them defensively. And I think you have to back them to really get a clean sheet against this newly promoted side that haven't scored many so far this season. So yeah, that's the pick. There are a bunch of others. I'm personally going to play William Yarbrough myself, just because I still have him from a previous week and it didn't make sense to go out and buy a new goalkeeper. But I just thought for Challenger, it's really interesting, and you've got a player here that you're kind of catching in that L15 under 40, but realistically they could be very serviceable in under 23 or in Challenger Europe moving forward. So I think it could be a really useful signing that provides utility in Specialist and beyond, which is something that I'm always looking for when picking and previewing players for this video. Next up, and one thing that you can take advantage of in the Specialist tournaments is playing two players from the same team. So looking here, we know that Besiktas have a great fixture this weekend, so you do actually have the opportunity to run a defensive stack pairing Destanoğlu and Roman Saiz. He was playing at Wolves last season, and ultimately that influences his scores. He's dropped down from Champion Europe League into a Challenger Europe League, which is always a really good sign. Much like Mark Bartra as well, there's, I think, some quite exciting moves to Turkey in the last couple of weeks. And I just think it's a really, really interesting play, particularly because he has put up a couple of really quite solid scores since he has moved to Besiktas. You've got these games here. He put a 60 up in his last game without a clean sheet. So, you've got to be looking at, can you back Besiktas to get a clean sheet this weekend against a newly promoted side? And I think that creates a really, really exciting dynamic for this pairing. Looking at an alternative option, this is a player that is currently in Challenger, but not for long, because when we see the introduction of the second division region, then he will move across. But as it stands, Anton Trusty is playing for Birmingham, and as it stands, Birmingham is a Challenger Europe side. He has had some hit and miss scores, to be honest, but what really stands out to me is that his last couple of games, he has looked quite impressive in these. The AA against Rotherham is ultimately a real standout. AA against Norwich, not so great, but he did manage to bag himself a goal, so there's always that chance. What stands out to me this weekend, Preston away, solid fixture. You imagine he would be busy defensively and have an opportunity to rack up AA as well. And I just think this is an interesting one because he's one of these players that is out of mint, potentially overlooked, and could be an interesting differential for this weekend. From a player that will be in the second divisions shortly to one that currently is. So we've got Bastian Oxipa, and the interesting thing about this is that the second division sides that were not already licensed, which are Bundesliga 2, Serie B, the Segunda Division, League 2, they are essentially only playable in the specialist tournaments. They're playable in the global, or if they qualify, under 23. So I think that this has led to some of them being a little bit overlooked at the moment. And Osikpa has moved. He was at Union Berlin last season. He has moved to Arminia Bielefeld, which is sort of lovely conditions for someone qualifying for a specialist, honestly, because you're taking their scores from a much higher division and you are then getting their scores, eligibility now in a weaker division. He grabbed himself 2 assists from left back last week, which I think is just, really, really exciting for what he could potentially do this coming weekend where they face Darmstadt. So yeah, really good fixture, really interesting player, and just honestly at the moment stupidly cheap because a lot of these second division cards are massively overlooked. I really am intrigued to see how their prices react when this new division gets added, because at the moment it does look like people are very slow to clock on to the ones that score well. One player that is neither in a second division nor in Challenger is Ricky Puig, who has made one of the strangest signings or transfers of the summer, going from Barcelona to LA Galaxy. I can't figure it out myself. I am personally really, really surprised by this transfer, but he qualifies. And this weekend, LA Galaxy have a pretty solid fixture because they are going to be playing Sporting Kansas City at home. Kansas have been terrible this season, in all honesty, and LA are normally pretty good at home. Puig really did impress in his first game away to New England, where he bagged an assist and a 19-point AA score. So the potential there is really quite significant, that he can put up some really high scores, and obviously he's qualifying based on all these sub appearances at Barcelona, so don't expect him to remain eligible for long. But again, much like Dustin Alogu, he's someone that you could use maybe only this week, to be fair, in specialist, and then you can roll them into an under 23 side as well. So there's real potential for this signing, and he's not an insane price at the moment considering how good I think he could be in MLS. Next up is another under 23 who has been subject to a recent transfer, is Jürgen Egelkamp. He was at Ajax but then went on loan last season to Hertha Berlin. Didn't really work out for him, and now he's found himself at Antwerp in Belgium. He's not started yet. I think this weekend could potentially be his first start, because we were likely to see a little bit of rotation with Antwerp playing midweek and then again at the weekend and then next midweek. So we're sort of making a bet that he will come into the squad and start this weekend. I think he's an exciting player. He's very talented. He came through at Ajax, and a game against Westerlo this weekend I think is pretty exciting. I think Westerlo at home is a solid fixture, and if he can bag a decisive, he could be a very, very useful player in these under 40 spots. Last but not least, when it comes to midfielder, is Jarrett Hendricks, who has moved from PSV to Fortuna Düsseldorf in the 2 Bundesliga. Again, he's one that's just massively overlooked in terms of his price, but scoring wise, put up a very respectable score in his first game, 59 points without a decisive. Dusseldorf this weekend are playing Heidenheim, which is a really solid fixture. Again, Rostock next week is a really good fixture as well. Looking at these scores, there's a chance that he could hold the specialist eligibility of the under 40 slot for more than 1 week, which could be really, really useful. So you could buy him this week and then potentially run him in 302, 304. But I just think, as his, first start at his new club to put up a 60-pointer, he, really catches the eye, and I think he could be a very, very interesting option for specialists and even for the second division tournaments when they are launched as well. Moving on to the forwards, and we have Andy Zakiri of Basel. Basel this weekend play against FC Sion. Big difference in the quality of those sides. So, I'm quite excited about what he can do. Most recent game, he did bag 2 goals in a game against FC Zurich, who are one of the stronger sides in the league. He was actually sick in 297, which is why he was a DMP, but he's a fully locked starter for Basel, and ultimately the reason that he's qualified is a bunch of sub appearances last season when he was at a different side. So he was at Augsburg in Bundesliga. So yeah, again, I think he's really interesting. He's also, when you look at it, he's got midweeks coming up in the Europa Conference League. There's some solid fixtures that he's got ahead of him here, and I'd be quite excited to play him and then use him in Challenger or under 23 coming into the subsequent weeks. Rolling ourselves back to the second division in Germany is Johannes Eggenstein. So he, much like many of the players on this list this week, subject to a transfer. So he was at Antwerp last season, kind of didn't really make an impact. Bunch of sub appearances, hasn't really done a lot. Since he's come to Bundesliga in Germany, he's got 3 goals in his opening 5 games. It's a solid choice here, and again, someone who is really, really cheap, and I think will be serviceable. I think he's going to be one of these players that you could use in the second div team moving forward. And I think this weekend, although a reasonably tough fixture against Firth, he has showed that he's capable of scoring goals at this level, and I think he could be an interesting addition for sure. As we move on to our final player, we go to Turkey and look at Haris Seferovic. He, 2 seasons ago in Benfica, was very, very good, but he lost his spot, unfortunately. Just a sea of DNPs, sub appearances, hasn't really done a lot, but he's starting to settle. I think he's settling. He's building his fitness in Turkey, and he's got close on a couple of occasions. He missed a couple of big chances last season, but I feel like he's one of these players that just needs 1 goal and then he'll go on a bit of a heater, go on a bit of a run. Very confidence-driven player. Gaziantep this weekend at home, you'd back him. This is the kind of fixture that he just needs. He needs 1. He needs to get 1, and then I think the goals will come flowing. I honestly do. So, yeah, he's sort of proven goal scorer. He's just settling into the team, and I think that this weekend could be a very good fixture for him. And yeah, that's it. That brings us to the end of this week's preview. Thank you ever so much for tuning in, and see you next time.